Hey everyone, it's Jasmine from Jasmine's Astrology, but you can call me Jay. And for today's video, I'm going to chat about Venus in Taurus. So on March 16th, around 6:30 p.m. Eastern, Venus will head into Taurus. This is one of her domicile signs, so she's at home in Taurus. She feels very comfortable there and well resourced. Venus can do Venus things in Venus ways while she's at home in Taurus. And so it's a really nice upgrade from Venus being in Aries, which is one of the signs where she finds her detriment and is therefore not as capable of expressing the sort of more pure version of herself. Now, she was co present with Jupiter during her time in Aries, so that definitely helped to mitigate some of the more frustrating or unstable qualities that a planet in detriment can bring because Jupiter tends to offer blessings and luck and optimism to wherever it goes and whatever planet it interacts with. So that definitely helped to soften some edges. You might have also noticed that during last year's transit of Venus and Aries because Venus and Jupiter were also co present at that time. However, they didn't get as close by degree. So I think that they made a conjunction in Aries this year, and so I think that kind of even further softened the edges, or just made their time together that much more potent and tangible, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, Venus's time in Aries isn't always great, but definitely a little bit better with Jupiter there. And her transition into Taurus will probably feel somewhat similar to last year because of that co presence with Jupiter, but also because both the North Node and Uranus are still in Taurus. They were there last year, they're there again this year. And so Venus will have to navigate sharing space with those energies, and they will eventually form some conjunctions. Still, your Taurus house topics are definitely going to get improved or be improved while Venus is at home because, while she's at home, she's just so much better equipped at sort of handling her rowdy and unruly guests because she's at home and she's well resourced, right? So, now, what is different compared to previous years is that this is the first year since 2020 where Venus and Taurus won't have to deal with a sign based square with Saturn in Aquarius, which was sort of just another factor that might have prevented Venus from being Venus and expressing herself in that more pure fashion. It was a little bit of a dampening. A little bit of a pressure that Venus had to deal with while being at home. So it was kind of not as functional as we might have liked it, or not as powerful as we might have liked it, not as potent. But now that Saturn has moved into Pisces for the next couple of years, Venus in Taurus will just navigate sextiles with Saturn in Pisces, and that's a much softer energy than a square. And we're going to talk about Venus sextile Saturn in just a few moments as well. But in general, if you've been feeling maybe under supported or a little chaotic, even, or just like, not great, Bob, in your Taurus house topics, Venus coming home should help to smooth a lot of that stuff out. So, for example, let's say you're a Leo rising and you have Taurus in your 10th house. You might just find that things with your career or your public life feel a little bit more stable and steady during this transit. Or maybe you are a Capricorn rising where Taurus would be your fifth house. And if you have children, your relationships with children might just feel that much more enjoyable or easeful during this transit. So you definitely want to check out where Taurus is in your chart. And if you need a guide for house topics, check the description of this video because there's going to be a link for a little PDF that I made up that has all of my views on what each of the houses means, and you can get that for free. So, Venus and Taurus in general is very much about slowing down and finding a more measured pace. It's this opportunity to sink into stable and steady rhythms and routines, into a consistency that brings us back to a sort of basic idea of quality over quantity. It can help us to reduce excess in certain ways. Taurus knows what it likes and it's happy to stick to those things as long as they are bringing pleasure and enjoyment. So we can feel content, just giving our attention to those sort of sacred essentials. And Venus coming home reminds us of the value of the relationships and interactions and activities that provide us with a deep sense of satisfaction. It reminds us to take time away from work to actually enjoy life and all of its little luxuries. And the luxuries don't have to be like going out for a fancy dinner and fancy drinks, although it could be if that's how you find pleasure, right? But it could also be, you know, coming home after a long day at work and just getting into something more comfortable, cozying up on the couch for a good episode of TV. It doesn't really matter how you find that pleasure. Another example that just came to me is like sleeping in and not feeling guilty about it, which is something that I, sort of struggle with. But again, it doesn't really matter how you find pleasure, but just that you make time for it when Venus is in Taurus. So Venus coming home is a bit like those days when you wake up and you're like, yeah, I look good today. Like, I feel good. I know my worth. I know my value. I know what I have to offer, and it's pretty great. And, like, especially after Venus was in Aries, where it does sort of struggle to see itself clearly or express itself fully, there's something really validating about Venus coming into her own sign and sort of just like breathing this sigh of relief of like, yeah, I can relax into myself again and it feels really nice. So, Venus in Taurus is also really beneficial for relationships, sweetness, and affection. And that can obviously be with our romantic partners, but also just in friendships or even with coworkers. It just tends to bring nice vibes for togetherness and being in connection. It is a very sensual placement. Venus and Taurus wants us to experience the whole range of our senses. So we're eating good food and we're drinking good coffee or wine or whatever beverages sort of bring you pleasure in that way. We're listening to our favorite music and wearing nice fabrics, getting a massage, having sex and being intimate with people, gardening, baking something from scratch, anything we can sort of get our hands into and feel in that way. It's looking at art, which could be, going to a museum and taking in some actual visual art, but it's also, watching the films and watching the TV shows that we find sort of visually stunning or really aesthetically pleasing in some way. People that know me will probably guess that I'm thinking about Twin Peaks in this moment and certain episodes that just like, it's a feast for the eyes. So whatever you find pleasing in that way. And then burning candles or incense or wearing lotions that you really enjoy the scent of, or getting some flowers or a new plant. Like, these are all of the ways that we can honor the senses and honor Venus being in Taurus. Now, as far as Venus in Taurus for 2023 goes, as I mentioned, Venus will be sharing space with Uranus and the North Node, and she'll form conjunctions with both of them before the end of March. Now, these conjunctions, which are when two planets or a planet and a point come together at the exact same degree of the same zodiac sign. So, Venus and the North Node will meet up at a particular degree of the sign of Taurus. But in general, both of these meetups they have the potential to be destabilizing. And that's because both the North Node and Uranus can push things a little out of balance. And that's not always a bad thing, except Taurus is a fixed earth sign. So it tends to really thrive on consistency. So, these combos can be a little tricky while they're happening in Taurus. Now, the North Node specifically, that tends to intensify things. It can have us craving something, And when it comes to meeting up with Venus, it might be like fast tracking a desire or fast tracking sort of Venusian things. So like an overindulgence of Venusian things. So the day when these two planets, or excuse me, when Venus and the North Node, because the North Node is just a point, it's not a planet, but when these two things make this conjunction, it could be that we're overindulging in Venusian things. So relationships, food, luxuries, but that could also look like really needing to be in nature and in green spaces, or just being outside. And the North Node and Venus will form that conjunction on March 20th, which is the same day as the spring equinox and the beginning of Aries season. So to me, that feels like a really nice day to get outside if you can, spend a little extra time in nature, and sort of feed the craving in that way. Now, with Uranus and Venus, it can be about finding new treats and trinkets that we value and also being sort of surprised by that newfound love. And I really quickly want to credit one of my favorite astrologers, Cassandra Tyndall, for the treats and trinkets. She always talks about Venus relating to treats and trinkets, and I love that so much. So definitely check her out. But yeah, so Uranus is very innovative and pattern breaking. So we might be more inclined to try something different just for the sake of experiencing deeper pleasure and more leisure, right? And so that's happening on March 30th. Then on April 7th, Venus will form a sextile with Neptune, and I love Venus sextile Neptune. It's so soft and cuddly. It helps us to get close and be vulnerable. It's really soulful and tender, and it kind of helps to break down barriers in relationships that might have been holding us back. And I'm probably going to talk more about this at some point because it's very much connected to the Libra full moon that we'll have in April. It happens just a day before that Libra full moon, but of course, Venus is the ruling planet of Libra, so it will be influencing that full moon, and the Venus sextile Neptune will play right into that. So, more on that in a couple of weeks. The aspect I'm really the most interested in here and intrigued by is the first one that Venus makes just after its ingress to Taurus, which is a sextile with Saturn. Happening maybe just 24 hours or even just less than 24 hours after it ingresses to Taurus. So that's on March 17th. And this is also the first aspect that Saturn will have made since ingressing to Pisces earlier in March. So there's definitely something heightened about this. It feels integral to both transits. So as far as the Saturn and Pisces transit goes, this feels like Venus maybe offering some support in the early days of the transit. Venus is exalted in Pisces, so it's almost like she's able to offer Saturn a really soft and gentle welcome into that sign. It's almost like she's helping her to get situated and settled in, and it's like, what can I get you, babe? Like, how can I make this journey, how can I get this journey off to a great start for you? um and yes, I did just call Saturn her. Not that planets really do have gender, but you're probably more used to hearing Saturn referred to as he. I feel like Saturn really has like some wise woman, crone, um, grandma energy. Not that grandmas or crones need to be gendered either, but that's another conversation. But, anyways, that's just my feeling. That's a total aside. Now, as far as Venus's time in Taurus goes, for me, this sextile with Saturn being so close to the ingress, this sets the tone. This really emphasizes the slow down and savor qualities of Venus and Taurus, like the stop and smell the roses of it all. I think we're really being invited to consider what's really going to have value in the long term. What relationships and commitments and collaborations are worth your investment and energy, because that's what's going to provide that quality over quantity in the months and years to come. It is an opportunity, I believe, to focus on the kind of pleasure that's got the capacity to sustain you over a longer period of time, more than just those immediate indulgences. And I am somewhat partial to Venus Saturn interactions and energies. They're not always great. They can be tricky, of course, under a more difficult aspect like a square or an opposition. But I guess I tend to see the more useful delineations or connotations of them. It could have something to do with something in my own birth chart, but I do feel that this meeting in particular between Saturn and Venus feels very nourishing, very full of potential for that steady and long term growth. So we have Venus in an earth sign and we have Saturn in a water sign. And earth and water together, I don't know, but that makes me think of spring and the conditions for life. So, and of new life, right? Like it's mud, it's soil, it's sustenance, it's the very thing from which things are able to sprout and blossom and grow. If you read tarot, you might think about the Pentacles suit, right? And the Pentacle suit is not a get rich quick kind of energy. It's definitely abundant. It's definitely about prosperity, but it is over the long haul, right? It is with sustained effort, sustained commitment that we see that abundance and that prosperity. And I think that is very much what this Venus sextile Saturn is talking about. Venus and Taurus is already telling us to slow down and that there's no rush, right? And then I think this is just really reinforced by that sextile with Saturn. Now, Saturn sextile Venus can also be about setting boundaries and not feeling guilt about it. Like, you know what you're capable of, you know what you're available for, and that's enough. And there's this quality of being able to see really clearly how you can balance your commitment and your pleasure. And in setting those boundaries, I think that we show the people that we're in relationship with how they can best show up for us and give us what we need. And of course, vice versa, right? So definitely consider your Pisces and Taurus houses and how they're interacting with each other and how those areas of life might come together to create the conditions for that growth process. So let's go back to our Capricorn rising example. That would be the third house and the fifth house. So maybe it's about working towards bringing more pleasure bringing more pleasure, which is fifth house, into your daily routines, which is third house. Or maybe you're a Gemini rising, so that would be 10th house and 12th house. And maybe you're considering that quality over quantity piece in terms of your more public and your more public life and your career, that's the 10th house, versus the time that you need to spend in solitude and in recharge mode, which is, 12th house. So, like, what really matters and what is going to be of the most value to you moving forward and in the long run? Now, if nothing else, I think Venus and Taurus is going to be a very nice balm or remedy of sorts from all of the mental chaos that Mars has been bringing our way for so long now. Venus in an earth sign feels very soothing to the body. It's like just like a nice soothing soak for our nervous system almost. And I think it allows space for grounding and transmuting and channeling out some of that excess mental stimulation. I think about when I was talking about like making something from scratch. It's like if you're making a dough with your hands, you're getting all of that energy out, and Gemini rules the hands. So that's why I'm thinking about, doing it in that way. This is a very interesting gesture that I'm making. Anyways, you get the point. Um, so getting out some of that excess mental stimulation. Venus and Taurus just wants us to do things for the sheer pleasure of it. And Venus will only be in Taurus until about April 11th. So I say just enjoy it while she's there. And let me know in the comments where Taurus is in your chart and what you think this Venus and Taurus transit might help you improve upon or upgrade in that area of life. And maybe even how you see that Venus Saturn sextile playing out for you. I would love to know. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. If you're enjoying this content, I would be super grateful for a like and a subscribe. But either way, thank you for watching. I just appreciate you being here. You can check out my website for consultations and other offerings if you'd like to work more with me or learn more about astrology. And until next time, everyone, I'll catch you in the cosmos.